Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. As part of our answer writing series for General Studies papers of Civil Services main examination, we take up a question that might appear in GS paper 3. So let us read out the question together. Habitat fragmentation is a major threat to biodiversity. Elaborate. Also, discuss the causes of habitat fragmentation in India. So, in the first part, you have to, as the question, you can understand by reading out the question that the question wants you to explain in detail how habitat fragmentation is a major threat to biodiversity. And in the second part, in the context of India, you have to discuss the causes of habitat fragmentation. So it would be worthwhile to give a brief definition of habitat fragmentation, of the very phenomenon of habitat fragmentation. So habitat fragmentation is the phenomenon of breaking up of large continuous habitats into smaller isolated patches. Now, it is common observation that the Himalayan foothills, the Tarais, the Western Ghats and the Northeast India, which had extensive continuous forests, have been fragmented into isolated forests. There is even reports of encroachment on protected areas. You must have heard that humans are encroaching upon protected areas like the national parks, the wildlife sanctuaries, the wildlife reserves and so on. Habitat fragmentation presents many threats to biodiversity, endangering the wildlife. This is just a restatement of the question. And while we have to also take into account habitat fragmentation in the context of aquatic habitats also. It would not mean only forests or terrestrial habitats, but aquatic habitats also is affected by habitat fragmentation. We would see how habitat fragmentation is a major threat to biodiversity. In what ways it is threat to biodiversity? First is it leads to decrease in genetic diversity. It leads to decrease in genetic diversity, which makes wildlife susceptible to diseases. Second is it engenders human-animal conflict. It may lead to human-animal conflict. Second, then it affects wildlife behavior. We would explain this point later. Then it makes the animal susceptible to accidents from collisions, electrocution, etc., which may lead to wildlife losses. Then it may also lead to increase in wildlife and forest crimes, as the isolated small patches are easy to penetrate, and so poachers and other wildlife criminals, smugglers, etc., would find it easier to operate there in the smaller patches. Now we would take up these points in detail. Fragmented, isolated habitats isolate mating populations. This is a very important point, that isolated habitats isolate mating populations. That is, they would not come into contact with each other. This might even lead to inbreeding. Again, inbreeding is when the genetically quite near, genetically related individuals mate. Then it's called inbreeding. Inbreeding or mating among closely genetically related wildlife. This decreases genetic diversity, leaving wildlife susceptible to diseases. As a thumb rule, you should remember that a genetically diverse population is less susceptible to disease, and in direct contrast, a genetically less diverse population is more susceptible to diseases. So, the decrease in genetic diversity due to habitat fragmentation would make the wildlife more susceptible to diseases. Then, it may lead to human-animal conflict. human animal conflict may result from habitat fragmentation, as animals may retrace their previous range and migratory paths. You would probably know that some of the animals which are really intelligent, for example the elephants, they have been tracing the same migratory paths for many generations. We will repeat it here that some animals, for an example, elephants have been retracing, they have been coming through the same migratory paths for many generations. So even while, for an example, a human habitation comes along their migratory path, they would still come back to their own migratory path, they would retrace it, and in doing so the animals, the elephants, would come into conflict with humans. There is a dire predicament here for both animals and humans also here. Actually, by some report, 500 humans are killed, almost 500 humans are killed every year by elephants. Of course, there is no fault of the animal, and even sometimes it's no fault of the hapless man too, but again, due to human animal conflict, many human lives and many animal lives are also lost. The same report says that 100 elephants too are killed in this manner. Anyway, so habitat fragmentation may lead to human animal conflict with not good consequences for both humans as well as animals. Then this point, habitat fragmentation puts wildlife into stress. You can well appreciate that large animals like elephants, gaur, tigers, etc. require contiguous forests, that is large habitats, because because of their energy needs, and also for all sort of biological needs, they would require larger forests, larger habitats. And when these habitats are fragmented into smaller patches, they are put into great stress. Actually, there is a report by NCBS, the National Center for Biological Studies, Bangalore, which says that the gaur population in central India, for an example, the regions around Madhya Pradesh, parts of Maharashtra, etc., are stressed due to habitat fragmentation. Then we have the specific example of linear infrastructure projects, like this is again in news lately. Linear infrastructure projects like roads, railways, transmission lines might cause accidents leading to wildlife loss due to collisions, the animals being run over by vehicles and trains, as well as they are coming into contact with transmission lines, leading to their death by electrocution. Now, some major causes for habitat fragmentation in India are linear infrastructure projects. Actually, these projects have been implicated in so many wildlife losses. They are most to blame. They divide the habitat, as we can well understand, they divide the habitat along, you can say, almost vertically. They divide the habitats. Countless animals are run over by vehicles and trains, transmission lines. For renewables, again, this has been in news lately that transmission lines for renewable projects have been blamed for decline of the great Indian bustard in parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Now also, taking up the example of the aquatic habitat, dams lead to inundation of forests. Mines, for an example, require deforestation. And for the specific example of dams block free movement of aquatic fauna. Dams block the free movement of aquatic fauna. We can give the example of the infamous example of the hilsa fish of Bengal and parts of Bihar also. The hilsa fish migration upriver and downriver was affected by the building of the Farakka barrage. The hilsa fish was blocked by the Farakka barrage. So we can understand that the linear projects, for an example, they cause stress to the animals by uh, forcing them to change their behavior. Now, expansion of farmlands into forests, plantations, etc. Expansion of farmlands into forests, plantations, etc. also lead to habitat fragmentation. We can give the specific examples of tea plantations in eastern Himalayas and the northeast, and coffee gardens, spice plantation, etc. in the western Ghats, which have caused habitat fragmentation. Then haphazard urban expansion. Haphazard urban expansion is also to blame because sometimes it encroaches upon the forest land and leads to deforestation and habitat fragmentation. Now, a basic summation of the answer. Habitat fragmentation causes loss of genetic diversity, as we have discussed, as we have just seen. It leads to human-animal conflict and causes wildlife losses in accidents and so on. Therefore, it needs attention. Various measures now. What are the various measures which can be tried to prevent and mitigate it, both to prevent habitat fragmentation and also mitigate the ill effects of habitat fragmentation? Wildlife corridors. Again, this has been tried with an idea that has been tried with and has been found to be quite successful. Wildlife corridors can reconnect isolated forest patches. They can connect the isolated forest patches. Then we can try some engineering solutions to, for an example, wildlife overpasses, fish ladder, etc. Try to Google up fish ladder. It's an interesting concept, and it is actually built around barrages and dams to facilitate the unobstructed movement of aquatic species. These engineering solutions have been found to be useful. Then we should also enforce the protected areas norms. Enforcement of protected areas too is required to deal with encroachments. So this is all for today. This is how we sum up our answer. But before we end our class for today, we must again and again encourage you to write your own model answers, attempt your own answer writing in the comment section below, as we are not left with much time now. The exam is almost around the corner, so we should girdle up more and try to write a few answers in the comment section below. We would be, time permitting, try to evaluate as many of your answers as we can. So that is all for today. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.